Pull up, grab the fuel nozzle, and get ready to fuel up on trends and strategies to grow your travel center business in this episode of The Truck Stops Here, brought to you by NATSO. Now, here's your host, Amy Toner.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Truck Stops Here. I'm your host, Amy Toner, and today I have a special guest host, Miss Tiffany Wlazlowski Neuman. Hey, Tiffany.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for having me back.
I know, right? You've been a special host a few times. She's our Vice President of Public Affairs at NATSO. You are listening to the Truck Stops Here, NATSO's podcast. NATSO is the National Trade Association for Truck Stops, and our mission is to advance the success of truck stops and travel centers, and this podcast is just one of the many ways that we do that. Today, our guest is Jake Elovirta. Jake is with the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, CVSA, and you are the Director of Compliance and Enforcement Programs. Hey, Jake.
Good afternoon, Amy.
So we had the pleasure of having you speak in September before NATSO's Shop Repair Safety Group. You gave a special briefing to them, and it was so good. We thought we'd have you back onto the podcast so you can share a little bit of that information with everybody. So first, we want to just set the scene and see if you can tell us what are the move over laws.
So move over laws are is a law which requires motorists to move over, change lanes, and give safe clearance to law enforcement officers, firefighters, emergency medical services, utility workers, and now more than ever in many cases, it's tow truck drivers and disabled vehicles on the highway.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit how those laws differ by state right now?
So most of the states have a move over law in place. The issues where you see the differences in the states is the nuances of the language, how the language is written, and actually what classes of categories of folks are actually covered by it. Two examples. One is just a lot of the move over laws say you have to change lanes or slow down your speeds. And it certainly varies geographically from state to state, for how, can you physically able to actually move over lane? I mean, if you're in a rural area, you're not going to be able to do that as much as if you're more urban area, more lanes of highway. In addition, the language also is whether or not, in this case, tow trucks, repair vehicles, are those covered? For the longest time, and I can give it from my previous experience, work experience, in the Northeast, one of the states did not have repair vehicles or wreckers or tow truck operators covered under the move over law, nor did it have the local DOT covered under those regulations as well, specifically for police, fire, EMS. So based on input from those specific organizations, they went back to the state legislature and had those incorporated in as well. So that's where kind of what you see right now, the different nuances with the state regulations.
As I said in the intro, NATSO has a Shop Repair Safety Group, and their big focus is to keep their repairmen safe on the road. I know that you have some good suggestions on that. So what can they do to keep them safe on the road?
Well, one of the things as a company or an organization is what do you have for policies in place for work rules, workplace safety for your employees? And one of the things I think is always a good starting point is what does your state OSHA require? One of the things I saw again in my previous career in law enforcement, for the longest time, I was in it for 32 years. When I first started my career, you weren't required to wear a safety vest. When you were out on a crash scene or out on a traffic stop that was going to take a while. And towards the end of my career, that became mandated by our state OSHA requirements, our organizations that we would, and they would actually said they would ticket the department or the officer for not wearing them if they were observed out on the highway not wearing their safety vest. So you've seen a real change. I think one of the biggest things is just having a policy in place, whether or not it's a governmental entity or a private organization. Do you have a policy or expectation about your employees, what they wear for safety equipment or deploying the safety equipment? And that really does come to you. Do you require a traffic vest when they're out on the road? They're going to be exposed for a long period of time on the side of the road if they're trying to repair a tire on a truck or, just even trying to hook it up to remove it from roadside. The other thing you're seeing a lot more of is just what other equipment are you deploying? You have your service vehicles. Do you have them marked in such a way, reflective markings or lighting, warning lights that really make those employees visible to the public when they're out at the roadside trying to affect those repairs? You are seeing a lot of organizations now, and particularly you look at police and fire and ambulance, the rear of their vehicles are all reflective markings. There's certain standards, particularly in the fire service, they actually have a specific standard now for reflective markings on the rear of their apparatus and EMS vehicles. Law enforcement, you're seeing it do the same thing. You're starting to see that in the service industry as well, whether it's public utilities or in the tow industries or service roadside repair. Lighting is a big thing. You're starting to see more sophisticated lighting from the standpoint of you really don't want to dazzle the passing motorist with the bright strobes or bright LEDs that are now being marketed. And you're actually seeing some companies actually work with the lighting to make it more visible but not distracting, what we used to call the moth to the flame. You'd have some of these bright lights, particularly at night, and they're changing how the light output is. They're dropping it down or they're sequencing it if there's multiple vehicles in place. The other thing is, are you using signage, whether or not it's warning that you have repairs up ahead of a repair vehicle or vehicle stop? The other thing that I've seen a lot more now is digital or electronic roadside flares that actually sequence that you can put out in place around your vehicle. I'm sure a lot of your companies members have road cones, but the lighting is actually even more effective, I think, in just kind of helping direct the traffic around the vehicles that are at the side of the roadway. So, and lastly, I think really most importantly is just your employees' clothing. You're seeing a lot of manufacturer now making workwear that has integrated reflective materials or colors to make those employees visible at roadside as well. So those are certainly things that a company should be thinking about when they look at their employees when they send them out on the highway.
Jake, a lot of our members are, working on commercial vehicles, right? They get the call if a commercial truck breaks down out along the interstate, which is a little bit different to move than a passenger vehicle. So what, if any, conversations do you have with the motor carrier industry, or what's the best recommendation you would have for our industry and the motor carriers to be collaborative on this particular issue?
Well, particularly, like you said, your membership is servicing a lot of the commercial vehicles, definitely on limited access or divided highways, the interstate systems, just because that's where their business is located. One of the things I think you're seeing becoming more collaborative, and I think is if they haven't had a discussion that they should be considering having a discussion, is training on traffic incident management, or TIMS. That is something that is becoming.
Can we clarify that term? Traffic.
Sure. Yeah. Traffic incident management, and they also call it TIMS, Traffic Incident Management Systems. And it's a program that the Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, has actually advanced and is an active program. And this, the TIM, the Traffic Incident Management, consists of a planned or coordinated. It's a multidisciplinary process to detect, respond to, and clear traffic incidents and to restore traffic flow. So one of those players in that whole process would be your membership if they're coming out. If you have a commercial motor vehicle, tractor trailer, disabled at the side of the roadway, on a limited access highway, how much traffic can get backed up, particularly if that truck isn't far enough off the roadway, how much of an impact that happens on the highway. And so TIMS focuses on quick clearance and removing that obstacle to the traffic flow on the highway in a safe manner. So it's an integration of your law enforcement, maybe some of the first people that show up on scene, possibly if it's an accident, involved interaction with a commercial vehicle and passenger vehicle, and you have to remove the disabled vehicle. You may have fire EMS checking out folks, and then your membership come into the scene to either effect repairs or remove it from the highway. So from looking at TIMS, it's an opportunity to work with your local Department of Transportation's, your local law enforcement for the area that you cover, your fire EMS. Those things, all of them have a key component to the process. And so what you see is TIMS is really a very much a uniform process that is being rolled out nationwide, that is being more and more rolled out to all the states. And there's quite a bit of training available for TIMS management and for the participants.
Who is rolling that out? Because our members love when there's a uniform approach to something rather than a state by state approach. So who is rolling that out? And then what, if any, conversations are you having with, the regulatory agencies such as FMCSA, or how do we move it beyond a state by state initiative? So
the training TIMS itself is a uniform type of training that was developed and is rolled out by FHWA. It differs from different states who actually provides the training, but typically it's more on the emergency management side. It could be your state highway department. It could be your fire departments. It can be law enforcement. Any of those instructors can do the training because it's a uniform process of providing the training to all the participants. So I've seen it done by a lot of different organizations because it is a standardized training that has been developed through FHWA. To look at something that, I think one of the comments you had talked about prior to this podcast was just uniformity. How do we increase uniformity state to state? That's somewhat of a challenge on the move over law, because you have to understand that each state is responsible for the actual traffic enforcement for their jurisdictions. And if you look nationwide, let's just talk speed limits. The federal government has recommended certain speeds, the maximum speed for a highway, but the states have been allowed to make adjustments on, whether your maximum is 55 miles an hour on certain highways, 65, 70, even 80 miles an hour, I think, out in the western states. So to say we want to have a standardized move over, that law, in order to do enforcement, has to actually be enacted by your local state government entities. And that's where you're always going to have your nuances of that, of not being able to have that uniformity, because you're asking the states to enforce it. It isn't like you have a federal highway law enforcement agency that could be able to enforce it nationwide.
So that it would really almost be, to some degree, incumbent upon both the truck stops and the carriers to have a uniform set of practices, correct?
Yes, I think that is really the starting point for your members, would be to look at those practices. And again, I think if you look at the TIMS training, that kind of lays the groundwork for you. I also think that if you look at your state OSHA and national OSHA standards about responding to roadside scenarios, that whether it's a traffic stop, the vehicle's got to be towed, or it's been a crash and fire and EMS are on, or it's just disabled, what are your requirements for safety for your employees while they're out on the roadside in that type of environment?
Are we done grilling him, Tiffany? Did we get it all?
Was I grilling?
No, I'm just teasing. I have our fun questions, but I just want to make sure we got all the good stuff. I know I had an extra question on lighting, but you kind of did talk about that.
What are you looking for, maybe?
Oh, I know when we had you in September, our NATSO members were focused a bit on the lighting recommendations, and if you just have any more thoughts on that.
Well, I definitely, again, scene lighting is really important. You'll see, particularly if you pay attention and look at law enforcement and fire and EMS nowadays, they've changed the way they do their lighting on their vehicles. What you're seeing more and more is the vehicles moving down the highway. The lights are flashing. They have a pattern that really gets your attention, and it can be almost a strobing effect, but it's designed to get the traffic in front of them and to the sides of them, make that traffic, oncoming traffic, aware of their approach or their response. However, what you're seeing after they get to a scene of an incident is that the lighting has changed now, where they slow down the flash pattern. And again, the concept of moths to a flame, if it's really bright and it's really heavy, we've seen a number of crashes, particularly in the law enforcement community, and deaths resulting from people just from the dazzling of the lights and being basically driving into cruisers, rear-ending cruisers, whether they were out on a crash scene, they were on a traffic stop, or they may be at a construction work zone site. So you've seen some manufacturers take a look at that and slow the lights down, or even to the point of, if you've ever flown out of an airport at night, have you ever seen the taxiway, the lights kind of gotta go up high and then slowly dim down, but it's a very noticeable, distinct pattern. What they've done is, at least one lighting manufacturer is incorporated that pattern into their nighttime operations. And what it does is it reduces the intensity of the lighting, but it also makes it visible to the oncoming traffic without being so distracting that it creates more of a hazard. In addition, a lot of, now if your membership has more than one vehicle maybe going to the scene, you can now program lights so that each of those vehicles sync up. So the lights are both on both vehicles are doing the same pattern at the same time. So it gives it a real continuity to the scene and doesn't impact the traffic. Everybody's seeing the same flash pattern. They're not seeing competing patterns. So particularly from that point, you're also seeing a more white light, just illumination of your location, whether you're doing repair on the vehicles. We're seeing just even some of the lighting now. Your mechanic opens his driver's side door, automatically you have a white floodlight that illuminates him, so you see him getting out of the vehicle. It's not opening a door into a darkness and oncoming traffic. So the technology has come a long ways from when I started 33 years ago. It's kid in a candy shop when you see the new technologies out there to make it more visible. It's quite impressive.
Jake, I don't want to get you in trouble with this question, but is there like one state in particular that maybe you think is doing it better than other? Who's doing it the best?
From the lighting?
Just in general, from the whole, move over safety package.
I think it's really hard. I would say that you're definitely, particularly in the Northeast or on Eastern Seaboard, you're seeing a lot of states that have really jumped on TIMS. I think one of the states that I've seen really embrace the TIMS program, and they have an awesome instructor out of there that really highlights it, is the state of Pennsylvania, and particularly the Pennsylvania Turnpike. One of the technologies I forgot to mention is just using some of the electronic apps that are out there. Pennsylvania, one of the apps they have a device that as soon as their trucks turn on their emergency warning or their warning lights, it sends out a transmission to the surrounding traffic in the area. And so if anybody's ever used the Waze app, W-A-Z-E app, for traveling, it will put out an alert to say that you have a vehicle stopped up ahead. I'm another one, a proponent of used that app quite a bit, but there are a number of apps out there similar to that of, just making yourself, if you have that employee out there, making it known he's out there. You can put with this specific app, you can mark off that there's a hazard ahead, vehicle on the roadside or a vehicle in the highway, and that gives that extra warning to the motorists that are maybe coming up onto the scene. I'm a big proponent of that type of technology to give it a warning, and it's a great free app to use. So. But, like you said, the Eastern, Pennsylvania is a big one. I know Virginia is another state that is very big into using TIMS. A lot of the states, particularly with the heavier urban areas, and really the focus is on quick clearance, because if you have a disabled vehicle or a crash scene or stuff, that really can bog up and create real additional hazards because the traffic is bottlenecked. So the whole TIMS training helps to make the clear that scene, make the scene safe, so that you can keep the traffic flowing, but also protect those people that are working the scene at the same time.
Okay. I have a lot of good notes. So much good stuff. All right, before we let you go, we're going to ask you my fun questions. It's okay. A bit of a U-turn. Okay, but you can't come on my podcast without it. So, what's your go-to on the road snack?
I'm sorry?
What is your go-to on the road snack?
Go-to on the road snack. Liquid or solid food?
You choose.
For me, I gotta have my cold brew. Straight cold brew, black cold brew for me on the road. And maybe that's just my law enforcement days.
Well, you already got the next one is how do you take your truck stop coffee? So you got that one. All right. Do you prefer to ride or drive?
I prefer the drive.
Okay. And this actually might have happened to you in Vermont. If you're stuck at a truck stop in a snowstorm, how do you pass the time?
Well, prior to cell phones and mobile apps, you'd probably catch a quick nap. But now it's like catching up on email or
right?
Look at your social media when you're on your cell phone.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Tiffany, for being my special host. And thanks to everyone for listening to today's episode of the Truck Stops Here. You can find us online at natso.com/podcast. If you have any questions, reach out to me at editor@natso.com. Bye, guys.
The Truck Stops Here was brought to you by NATSO, the association representing truck stops and travel centers. Visit natso.com for more information. The Truck Stops Here is produced by NATSO in collaboration with Human Factor. Producers are Amy Toner and Darren Schulte.